You know, sci-fi does have a serious role, more than just kind of titillation and ray guns and spaceships. It's about much more than just kind of the surface idea of sci-fi. And so one of my favorite authors, the sci-fi authors, Octavia Butler, she made a quote. She was asked about this topic, and I'm going to read it to you. When she was asked, what good is science fiction to African people? She answered, what good is any form of literature to black people? What good is science fiction thinking about the present, the future, the past? What good is its tendency to warn or to consider alternative ways of thinking and doing? What good is its examination of the possible effects of science fiction and technology, or social organization and political direction? At its best, science fiction stimulates imagination and creativity. It gets reader and writer off the beaten track, off the narrow footpath of what everyone is saying, what everyone is doing and thinking, whoever everyone happens to be today. So today's event is going to be split into two halves. This half is the literature event, and the second session is going to be dealing with film. And I want you to kind of take away the connotations and the stereotypes that we have of sci-fi at present. And I want you to kind of like, you know, give it a little bit of space and think about its roles, as Octavia Butler spoke about, examining and reimagining and considering the implications of today's technology, social organizations. It's a big thing, serious thing.
Sure. You know, I sat down in preparation for this and I thought about all the films and books that I've enjoyed over the last 10, 20 years. You know, Blade Runner, Gattaca, Children of Men, Equilibrium, Strange Days, Soylent Green, AI, Dark City, Total Recall, Mad Max.
Don't get me started, please.
But there are two things about this list that I find very interesting. One is the point that you just made. But secondly, they're all very dark. Yeah. You know, they all represent futures that we wouldn't want to live in. And I think that's what's great about science fiction. You know, science fiction writers rarely write books about happy, hunky-dory futures because they're trying to warn people about things. They take individual slivers of our current nature and say, if you allowed this to get out of control, this is the sort of world you could live in. And for me, that says that science fiction is very moral fiction. I've tried to read all sorts of other genres, and I always feel I've been spoiled by the genre because I pick up books and think, I don't know what this is about. And it doesn't need to be about anything. It might just be there to entertain you. But sci-fi always feels like it has a core point at its base, a core point at its heart, and it always tends to be a moral point. You know, whether that's about our greed, whether it's about you know, social injustice, whether it's about our simple inability to sit still and, you know, not mess with things, not mess with nature.
That's a good point.
And I mean, the last thing I do want to say about this is that moral message, I think, is really important for both people today and future generations.
I got a call from Menelik Shabazz, and he, you know, I thought I was going to get a bollocking. I just thought someone...
Before you don't lose that chain of thought, just for all the listeners who don't know, Menelik Shabazz, one of the first pioneer filmmakers in this country. And I think many people know him for Burning an Illusion.
And Catch a Fire.
Catch a Fire, Blood Go Run. But I think one of his first films was Time and Judgment, which was a science fiction film, which I think it was only broadcast ever once on Channel 4. So just in case anyone doesn't know, Menelik Shabazz is a real pioneer filmmaker. But again, the science fiction side of his work isn't well known. But sorry, before I interrupted you.
Yeah, he requested that he wanted to speak to me, and I just thought, wow, I'm going to get really run by a professional. He's going to cuss me out. So I remember I literally sweated buckets as I spoke to him on the phone, and he was just full of praise for the fact that I'd entered the genre. He said he'd actually gotten tired of reading because he felt like he'd read everything before. And he said the beauty of what I had written was that it had taken us into the future. You know, as you had mentioned, he said that he feels as if Black people don't see themselves in the future, so we don't write ourselves into it. And I felt that was a very, very potent comment, and it's stayed with me continuously since hearing his words, because it is very true. We don't write ourselves into the future.
I mean, Biram, what challenges? I mean, okay, so you decided to take this path, this kind of like path of least resistance, least talent. And no, I'm only joking there. But seriously, you've taken this path here. What challenges did you face? I'm pretty sure it couldn't have been an easy decision.
I guess my biggest challenge has been to not forget the distinction between what I'm trying to do, which is science fiction about African futures, versus just writing science fiction stories that are set in Africa. Because I think the two things can be similar, but also can be very different.
I think the biggest challenge is, for myself, the reason why I found it hard to define myself as being a sci-fi author initially is because, to me, our very experience can be construed as sci-fi. When we go into our spirituality, when we go into the history of, the foundation in terms of some of our native religions and so on, that is science fiction. Our life is science fiction. So for me, I was just writing about spirituality from my perspective, what I live, what I breathe. And as it was unfolding, I was like, ooh, this is beginning to sound like science fiction, fantasy. But I couldn't equate it as that because it was too close to home. To me, it was just, I'm just writing my own story.
Did you manage to complete the scan? Michael asked. Just completed, the administrator said. There's only one village in the crater, no more than 30 individuals. Well, that's good news, Michael said. Are they tribesmen? They are Maasai, the administrator said. Do you speak their language by any chance? I'm not sure, Michael said. The administrator looked up at him sharply. What does that mean, he asked. Be careful, Michael thought to himself. Be careful. He was only ever going to be useful to the company if he knew more than the administrator. Advisors who know less than their employers are not going to be advisors for very long. What I mean, Michael said, is that they may be able to speak Swahili, but they have their own language too, and I don't speak that. I don't think anyone does anymore. The administrator scratched his chin, still looking unconvinced. Be careful, Michael thought. Give him a little more. Also, I think we should approach them during the day. They have a reputation for being a resistant people. They like resisting.
Imagine that. I could sign in 5 languages, and the most it got me was a bloody banana. Now I have to incarnate as the very epitome of ignorance that failed to recognize that the sun doesn't shine out their bloody arse. Imhotep thumped his fist on the ground in annoyance. Nana howled with laughter and beat one of her forepaws on top of the other. Teeny stifled again a giggle. Oh, it's not that bad, Imhotep, soothed Nana. Your experiences are nothing without having tried humanity for size. Says you, Imhotep pouted. If I must incarnate in the form of a human, at the very least it should be in the form of the most superior of their lowly species. An autistic human's body vehicle would be a more fitting shell. But no. Their lesser human counterparts deem them as having a developmental disability. Idiots, the lot of them. I know you're simply loving this, aren't you? Well, just a little. But then, what do you expect when you insist on insulting me so? Imhotep warmed to the autonomous nature of humans that were labeled autistic and attributed their reputation for living in their own world to being a godlike quality that lesser humans were unable to conceive. He reasoned that it was not they who were impaired by their limited ability for social interaction and communication. Rather, it was the rest of humanity that egotistically revered themselves as a measure for what was accepted by the majority as normal behavior. Was it the autistic one's fault that everyone else was unable to communicate on a wavelength compatible to higher minds? Surely it was not difficult to perceive that the characteristic of repetitive behavior was not restrictive or futile, but a microscale perfect mimicry of the order in which all gave birth to universes.
My name is Joy Francis. I'm Executive Director of Words of Colour Productions, which is a social enterprise that supports culturally diverse writers. And I'm really chuffed to be invited to chair the second panel discussion and screenings on African sci-fi films. Toyin spoke a bit about his sort of connection relationship with sci-fi. With me, it was the fact that when you think about sci-fi, it is about the imagination. It's about play. It's being childlike, but with boundaryless, limitless potential. And the fact that Logan Run, and a lot of it was one of my first sci-fi experiences, and the fact also that a lot of the sci-fi we grew up with was very male in my case. So it was very exciting as I grew older to see women being represented, obviously not as diverse as I would like. But the thing about sci-fi, I think, that appeals for people of color is about the fact that it seems to be a broad landscape where you can accommodate difference, be it dialectic, be it visual, be it in terms of sexuality, and where you can actually even challenge your own thinking about what is perceived as normal. So in terms of today and what's going to happen, we've only got less than an hour, so it's going to be a real challenge. But essentially, we're going to have 2 screenings. The first one is Robots of Brixton by Kibwe Tavares, who's actually here, which is great. We're also going to have another screening of Pumzi, which I think a lot of you are here to see. And obviously in between we'll have some discussion and we'll open up to the floor as much as possible.
Yeah, I think one of the projects I've tried to do in playwriting is to sort of bring in the African element, So for instance, you said Early Morning, the first play. In a sense it's sci-fi, but it's more speculative. And it mirrors the kind of dramas I used to watch on TV in Nigeria where fantasy and reality are in the same space. I noticed you said something about 2 worlds kind of occupy the same space. If you've tried, but I think there's actually a reality to it. If you've ever tried, and Kibwe will bear witness, if you've ever tried driving around the streets of Lagos, you see that 4 or 5 cars can actually inhabit the same space at the same time. But that's what I've tried to do. So Early Morning is a piece about 3 Nigerian cleaners in London who decide to overthrow the British government, and institute a blackocracy. Because for me, that kind of like science fiction and fantasies, it's also speculative. It's looking at the future, but also rooted very much in the reality of how we live today. So it's so you mirror things. So it's blackocracy. It's a government of the blacks by the blacks for the blacks. There's no going back, there's only going black. And it's all those sort of little things that you sort of tropes and things that you play with to sort of speculate. And it was a satire, but it was looking at something quite serious about the state of where we are today. And we've had such big discussions from earlier contributors about the fact that we always live for today. And this piece was a piece about people trying to create a future tomorrow. It's the same with the Christ of Cold Harbour Lane, about a character, and then I try to employ the myth of the Abiku, or the Ogbanje, the reincarnated figure. And it's about a guy who comes back and believes that he is the son of God, and he's here to start the revolution, and it starts in Brixton. And it's that kind of projection of what tomorrow will bring, and again, as a warning to us, if we continue to live the way we live, today, what kind of world will we create tomorrow?
Well, actually, you've done the introduction to Robots of Brixton. I don't know if you feel that way, Kibwe, from what you said, because 1, it's set in Brixton. 2, it looks at the potentialities, which obviously after it came out, we had the riots. Yeah. So without further ado, what I would like to do is for us to now watch Robots of Brixton, which is a fantastically poignant, evocative film that looks at the relationship between the urban environment, race and class, and with the remnants of the 1981 Brixton riots.
I guess there's lots of people after were saying, oh, you got such a unique look and a unique style. And I was like, a lot of that was just because I couldn't make it look as realistic as I wanted to at the start. I was like, I don't know how to do it. It took ages. And then I thought, well, I like this aesthetic and I like this look. And that's kind of what I'm going to go with and try and keep that consistent. And I guess it's about just kind of, it's a bit of a technical thing. It's about kind of, I knew that I had to finish it and I knew I've got this much time to finish it. So, I can only spend this much time. And if I'm happy with that, I kind of looked at the whole process and said, well, that's what I'm going to go for and that's what I'm going to stick with. But like, I don't know. It's just yeah.
Oladipo, I mean, you know, for you now with your short, I mean, what can you tell us about it and how are you approaching it?
Well, I'm trying to look at it again as from the position of culture, traditional religion, trying to use those elements, because I'm trying to look at other ways in which we can define an African sci-fi. And the reason why I say that is because doing my sort of research into the project that I'm working on, I was looking at some Nigerian films and comics, and what you get is that the sort of the iconography of the comics and the films actually resemble the comics that we used to read when we were young. So it's the Marvel, DC, you know, you've got the massive iconography, you know, and, you know, black characters with wavy hair and all that kind of stuff, which is in itself is not a bad thing. It's our modern conception of this sort of science fiction or cartoon comic characters. That's where it came from, you know, the importation of comic books into Nigeria. And so for me, it's like trying to say, well, how can I look at it from a position from the ground up, where we take sort of the traditional icons and then try and overlay a sort of, because again, science fiction is something I'm not quite sure, because it's a term that's used to describe something that was created in the West to discuss very serious and topical issues about the conditions in the West. But like, you know, I think we spoke of, even in the last discussion, which is very, very comprehensive, we spoke of our own attitudes towards, for instance, nature. In most African concepts, man is not at war with nature. So the idea of man versus technology, therefore, has to be looked at in a different way. Although in a sense, there is a certain kind of modernity in which we are looking at it because of the way the society is being shaped by external influences, the rise of China, the battle for resources, for instance. And these are issues which, again, have to be looked at, but not from a point of view of, say, for instance, a film like, I forgot the name of this, based on that John le Carré film about pharmaceuticals. Like The Constant Gardener, for instance, thank you. But then looking at it from an African point of view. So it's not a case of an English person in England who's going to look traipsing through Africa looking for, oh, there's a rhino, looking for his wife or something like that. It's more a case of, you know, again, it's from our point of view of what this means. And then it means that we may not have the kind of terminologies that they may use. Yeah. But we'll have our own, yeah.
Well, again, you're making my segues really easy because you're talking about nature, and the next film we're going to watch now is 20 minutes long, Pumzi, which is Kiswahili for breath, which is set in a futuristic post-apocalyptic Africa where water basically is a scarcity, and the communities living underground. It's very female-led. The director is Kenyan, Wanuri Kahiu. Wanuri is actually trying to get it made into a full-length feature film, so it'd be intriguing to see where that would go. I mean, I know, Kibwe, you're saying you hadn't seen it in full. I mean, what resonated for you? I mean, there's so much going on there in 20 minutes, very gently. Yeah. You know, relationship with Mother Nature, corporate bureaucracy, trying to be an individual, and the risks that come with that. And I mean, Wanuri said that for her, simply the film represented sacrifice and love. What does it represent for you?
It's a tough question. I guess for me, it was just her kind of. It was really clear her desire to kind of go outside, and her desire to. She was going to kind of do everything to kind of go against everything, and that was really strong, I thought. And also with kind of her being drawn completely to nature, and her giving up her water and giving up everything for that kind of one thing. I thought all of that was really strong. And that's the thing that runs through for me, is someone who's prepared to kind of, you know, what would the situation be for that one person to have to give everything for that, which I thought was really strong in it.
Oladipo, for you?
Well, for me, what it made me think of was the fact that in terms of an African sci-fi aesthetic, because of the events that have made Africa what it is today, it's very hard to end a story on a negative or pessimistic note, as you would get in most sort of dystopian science fiction. And that's what I liked the best about hers, is that sometimes, you know, in our own, most Africans have to project the future as being positive because of what it is now. So it's kind of pointless to do a sci-fi, anything sci-fi about Africa and say things are going to be worse than they are now. We're like, what? Are you serious? Okay, kill me right now. Just kill me now. You know. So yeah.
But I really want to thank Tosin, Biram, who's I think's gone, Kibwe, Oladipo, our guest speakers. Thank you very much. I also want to obviously thank Toyin, sci-fi master, and Courttia Newland as well, who put the event together. Also the artist Kofi Allen and photographer Drew Sinclair for the imagery, the Southbank Centre team, and also the Words of Colour team who are here. Samantha doing the social media, Nathan who's been patient in the back doing the filming, Yvette who's going to be blogging, and also Adrienne, who's our photographer, standing, another shapeshifter, because originally it was supposed to be Lee Townsend. It's amazing what we can do. All right, so look, thanks all very much, and keep in touch. Okay.